The first expansion for Final Fantasy XVI was shadow dropped this last Thursday during the Game Awards. Part 1 of a 2-part DLC pack, Echoes of the Fallen, costs $9.99, and Part 2, The Rising Tide, comes out next year and can be purchased as a bundle with Echoes of the Fallen for $25. I played through Echoes of the Fallen this weekend and wanted to talk a bit about it, whether I think it's worth your time, and how I fit it feels with the base game of Final Fantasy XVI. First things first, worth noting this DLC cannot be reached until very near the end of Final Fantasy XVI, so if you're still working your way towards the game, keep that in mind while watching this video. I'm going to try and not outright spoil the DLC itself, however most of the gameplay does take place in one location, so most of the footage will reflect that. First thing I did before I even tried to start the DLC was I went over to the Arit Stone, because I heard there was some new costume options for the main characters from a recent free update. I must say, Clive looks sexier than ever. Also, while I was there, I changed the appearance of my sword to look like the Buster Sword from FF7. This, I believe, was part of the paid DLC, but yeah, it looks neat, and now I'm feeling powerful and ready to button mash. To access the DLC, you talk to old Karen in the hideaway, and she'll tell you about some new dark crystals that have been showing up. She gives you one, points you along the way, and then you can officially start the DLC. The setup felt kind of shoehorned in there, but it was not egregious or felt overly out of place. It is worth noting though, there are a couple prerequisite side quests you will need to have completed before you can start this DLC. The first 45 minutes or so of this experience, you'll be chasing some new characters through familiar base game areas, nothing too special going on yet, then you'll eventually end up at a location I remember being very suspicious of in the base game, up here in the Dim. If you have played the game, you probably also ran into this area. It's a big circular door of the Fallen architecture. And guess what? This DLC is called Echoes of the Fallen, so we finally get to go in and see what's inside. This is now where you'll be spending the rest of your time with this DLC. It's a big Tower of the Fallen. You go through a couple of these in the base game, so admittedly I was a little upset to see yet another one of these, but kind of, you've seen one, you've seen them all kind of situation. But this one was definitely a little more impressive to take in and had some cool additional details. But at the end of the day, it's still the same kind of architecture as the Fallen structures from the base game. If you hadn't put it together, based on the name of this DLC and the location it takes place in, the main story focus here is learning more about the Fallen, the ancient civilization that used to inhabit Valisthea. The lore was pretty light in the Fallen in the base game in my opinion, so I was ready to learn more about this mysterious people, but overall, I don't think this DLC quenched my thirst for that information. You learn some neat details about them and see some of their technical prowess, but it did not flesh out the Fallen like I was hoping it would. The base game left a lot of questions in this area of the lore, and this DLC felt like it could have just been included as part of the base game. The story significance of what was told here really didn't feel like it justified a separate expansion this quick after launch. If this was in the base game, it would have just helped add a little bit extra amount of detail I was missing, but as a post-launch addition, I would have rather this come out in another 6 months or so and have a little bit more meat on the bones. Like most of FF16, this area was quite linear, basically funneling you down a straight path with the occasional mini-boss and cutscenes along the way. The bosses were pretty neat though, they all felt fairly challenging, especially the end boss, which I think might be the hardest fight in the game. I was a little bit rusty, but either way it was a really cool fight that asked a lot of me. As far as the rewards you get, there will be some unique pendants that all felt very valuable. I was switching them out for each other as I found them, finding use in each of them as I got them, and don't worry, you won't miss them as they're just placed in chests along your way as you progress here. You'll also get a couple of weapons as rewards, but if you've completed Final Fantasy mode like I have, you won't get anything that's stronger than what you've already gotten in the base game. Outside of a couple of new mini-bosses and the end boss, most enemies are variations of previously existing monsters with a slight coat of paint on them. Non-boss enemies were pushovers like I'd come to expect, and really only felt like they were there to slow down my progress to the tower and act as a breather and build some confidence, and to replenish on some potions along the way. Overall, I gotta say this DLC was a little lighter than what I was hoping for. In total, I think I finished it in about 2.5 hours, and I didn't come out of it with any super big revelations about the Fallen. This really does feel like an appetizer to a much more in-depth DLC down the line with The Rising Tide. If you liked FF16, but felt like you got your fill back when it came out, the Echoes of the Fallen probably isn't worth you coming back to check out. If you're hoping for some big cinematic icon fights, I hate to break it to you, but Ifrit does not even make an appearance here. Really, I can only recommend playing Echoes of the Fallen if you loved FF16 like I did, and wanted any excuse to come back. At the very least, you'll get a cool boss fight, some extra lore, even if I am worried this small amount is all we're going to get on the Fallen. But most importantly, you get Clive with the Buster Sword, and there are no two ways about it. That's just badass. Thanks for watching. Despite not being blown away by this expansion, I was glad to play some more 16. This game is in my top 3 this year, so just getting some more unknowns to explore, however short, was pretty fun. At the very least, this has got me excited for the next part of the expansion. I can't wait to see how they introduce Leviathan into the story. If you like this video and want to throw a like on it, that would be appreciated. If you want to hear me talk about more things in video game world, consider subscribing. So thanks again for watching, and see you next time.